Hello and welcome to the 62nd episode of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Philippa Haynes of Insight 101, supporting you to stand out.
And I'm Mark Lee. Oh, I'm Mark Lee. Book Mark Lee. Oh, never stumbled over my name before. I'm a mentor, speaker and debunker. Happy anniversary, Philippa.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Thank you. Today we're celebrating our second Podiversary. I thought that was a new word. It's not. Other people use it. We did our first interview at the start of June 2023. Thank you seriously again, Philippa, for encouraging me to become a podcast host.
Oh, you do it so beautifully.
When I don't stumble over my own name. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, we've interviewed a total of 50 inspiring accountants and bookkeepers who are doing great things, have years of experience, and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants and bookkeepers around the UK.
Yes, we both recognise that every accountant and bookkeeper is unique and distinct. They have different backgrounds, experiences, and reasons for starting and building their practices.
So we ask them to share their stories, including the highs, the lows, and what they've learned along the way. We look to explore the things that have made them different in terms of their background, their successes, their failures, and their focus. Our aim each week is to provide some fundamental insights for each of our loyal listeners.
Yeah, get your teeth in, Mark.
Thank you.
Beyond that, we also try to fit in regular reflections episodes like this one. So today, in just 30 minutes or so, we're reflecting on 4 of our most recent interviews. And we'll both share and discuss something from each interview that resonated with us personally.
But just before we do that, a word about the sponsor of our podcast, Pinnacle Global Group, the trusted outsourcing partner to over 150 accounting and bookkeeping firms across the UK and Ireland, led by London-based chartered accountant Mayank Pandya. With offices in London and Mumbai and a team of over 300 professionals, Pinnacle provides both compliance resourcing from accountants, bookkeepers and payroll admins to tax and audit associates, and value-added support, including management accounts, virtual finance controllers, financial analysts, and more. They're GDPR compliant, ISO certified, covered by professional indemnity insurance, and offer flexible models, full-time, part-time, or pay-as-you-go. You can even start with a trial period or join their sponsored trip to Mumbai to meet the team in person. Find out more at www.pinnacleoss. And I just scrolled too far in my notes.
And click the link wherever you're listening to this podcast. There we are. That was it. Also supporting the podcast is the Tax Advice Network. Their website enables accountants to choose specific specialist tax advisors for general tax support or for help across any of over 100 areas of tax. It's free to use. You pay the tax advisor you choose after agreeing terms with them. Go take a look at their website called findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to get their weekly tax tips, which are written especially for general practitioner accountants.
Thank you. Thank you for rescuing me there.
Okay.
For our first reflection today, we're going back to episode 58 and Harriet Formby, who in 2020 established Below the Line Finance based in Bath. Philippa, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I loved Harriet, only because she's very marketing literate, and of course that's what I do. So it was an absolute pleasure when she started talking about things like personality in her writing and her marketing, but also the tone of it. It was just the way that she even kind of tested some of the work that she did, you know, A/B testing. So she would try out with one tone and then another. She was just really, really inspiring, I think, for other accountants and bookkeepers who maybe, you know, don't think in that way. And I think it's just real inspiration for them to think about that. So that was one of the things I absolutely loved about her, and all of that sort of tone went all the way through her marketing. The other thing, which I'm sure you'll know more about than me because it's money specific and kind of trauma of money specific. When you're talking to clients about their finances, I'm sure part of the relationship is managing anxieties and managing worry, and also the good stuff as well. But the psychology of even earning a lot of money can be quite stressful. And I think the way that she had taken on that kind of role as kind of a trauma advisor, really, and it was based on accreditation as well, so it wasn't just something she'd made up. But I think that really adds a layer of value to her, and the way that she kind of works with her clients. So for me, that was really incredible. Not heard about it before, but brought a real human element. And I bang on about being human and about having your story and your theme and building relationships emotionally, not just logically. And this is really a great way of demonstrating that. So I loved our session with
I'm not
Harriet.
surprised. Not surprised at all. Beyond being a ICAW qualified chartered accountant, as you say, she's also a trauma of money practitioner, something I've never heard
No.
before. And she also has a postgraduate qualification in executive coaching and mentoring. And that all informs her direct approach to clients as a fractional CFO, as she calls it. And as you say, I too was fascinated by what I think was quite an astute observation that for some entrepreneurs, it can be stressful making big sales and receiving lots of money into the business in one go, or even securing grants and loans. And Harriet clearly has high emotional intelligence and is able to help her clients understand their money as well as their business. And I thought that was just a great way to stand out from the crowd. And I also loved, and again, very different to anybody else we talked about, I think, as every interviewee has proven to be. As an outsourced CFO for her client, Harriet doesn't generally do normal compliance work, other than for those of her existing clients or new clients who specifically ask for this on top of her role as an outsourced or fractional CFO. So she's not competing with anybody who is providing primarily those services. And that's very unusual. And I was also pleased to hear Harriet say that she encourages clients to get in touch in between their scheduled calls and meetings. But she doesn't drop everything when they get in touch. She gets back to them when she's finished what she's working on, which I think is very important. There's a lot of accountants I know who feel that they need to drop everything every time the phone rings or an email comes in. And that really doesn't make sense, because if you're working on another client's affairs, why does the phone call or the email justify stopping that and doing something else? And it's also the willingness to take calls in between scheduled meetings and calls is very much how I operate with my mentoring clients. They all know that they're welcome to get in touch between our regular scheduled calls. And like Harriet with her bigger business clients, I find that no one exploits the facility. They take advantage of it when it's relevant to them, but they don't abuse the facility, if you like. Clients respect our time as well as taking advantage of our willingness to provide additional support when necessary. And I loved hearing from Harriet that that's how she operates as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely, isn't it? I think she talked a bit about WhatsApp and that she used to use that a lot and then got completely swamped by it, which is the reason she talked to us about how she changed her sort of tactic there. It's interesting from my perspective. I obviously, when I'm working with my clients, I do have structures and processes, but I also I work out pretty quickly what is their preferred method as well, their MO. And that's important with what I do, because it's all about, as I've said before, about the person and the human side of it. So if somebody isn't really great with emails, I'm not going to get a response from them, because they're probably not going to be reading them. I have other clients who jump on the phone, and I know that they don't abuse it, but I do understand that suddenly that's how they prefer to operate, and so I will then change what I'm doing, and I'll use the phone rather than an email, and I know then that I'll get a better dialogue with them. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Right, so we probably need to go on to our next, don't we? The 59th episode. We're doing very well at counting here, I have to say. We spoke, and that's down to you, Mark, rather than me, I have to say. But we interviewed Chris Gascoigne, who's been running Acumist accounting practice in Windlesham, Surrey, for over 30 years. Do you want to start on this one, Mark? Yeah.
Well, Chris admitted that for many years he'd been building and running the firm as a lifestyle business, and that he's now able to be choosy as regards who he takes on as clients. Off air, he shared his turnover and profit figures, and I was able to tell him that his lifestyle business is doing a lot better than many other sole practitioners I've talked with. And the reason I'm reflecting back on this is to challenge the perceived wisdom promoted by many commentators and coaches. Too often they suggest that you can only be successful if you're constantly looking to grow your firm. And I think Chris is a great example of why that's not always the case. He's been making a good living from his firm for the best part of 30 years, despite not looking to grow, not updating his website, and not being as active on social media as he thinks maybe he should be. He gets referrals and recommendations despite all of that. The question is why and how, I suppose. And we thought this is probably down to his experience, his emotional intelligence, his intention of being kind, and his preference for collaboration, and the fact that he's focused on hand-holding his clients, working with them and keeping in touch with them across the year, not just once or twice a year. And we also talked with Chris about how AI will change the way that accountants do compliance work, but they won't replace accountants like Chris, who are providing that regular empathetic contact and support across the year. And I really applaud his style and approach. What about you, Philippa?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it, that Chris, as you said, he's been working for 30 years, had the business, lifestyle business, yes. And it's only now where he's kind of got to a certain age, I guess, where he's thinking about, what do I do with this? And what do I leave behind? Legacy issues, which I think, it comes to all of us. But I think talking personally. So that was interesting. The interesting part again is what you said about his website and all of that good stuff. Now it's quite interesting that he was in conversation with another practice. And he was, he divulged a bit of that detail, but not a lot. But what I would say is, for anybody who's thinking about either selling their practice or even thinking about a merger, you are far better to have great looking marketing and website and stuff, because when it comes down to valuing the business and looking at the the marketability of it, that's a factor. But I totally take the point, Mark, of what you've said, which is he's managed and prospered and flourished without that. But I guess for those who are thinking about their next steps, it's good to ensure that you are totally you've got the book cover sorted, if you like.
And I think I'd also say, and we didn't push him on this, at what point in that 30 years did he start really making a good enough living for him? There's a lot of startup practices that possibly don't want anything more than a lifestyle business, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. I'm a great advocate for it, in fact. But if you ignore what others might see as crucial marketing and branding and promotional skills, it will take a lot longer than if you get it all right and you invest some time and effort in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, as you said, Chris was really interested, loved his phrase kindness and collaboration, and you
Yeah,
picked up at the kindness bit as well. And I think Chris really was that, it sounds very soft, but he was a real kind sort of spirit, wasn't he?
yeah, very much so.
And I think very trustworthy as a result, and which it's all great sort of personality traits when you're dealing with other people's finances. The other thing that I remember is that Chris is an NLP practitioner as well.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Exactly. So he not only, can sort of manage a relationship and a conversation, he can see all the signs. He
Yeah,
can see the stress signs and everything else. NLP is a real gift for those who are in the business of people. And
mm,
actually, accountants and bookkeepers, it is the business of people, isn't it? Really, it's their finances, but at the end of the day, you're looking after them and their well-being. So that for me was really fascinating. And he was saying that the reason he thought about kind of merging or whatever is because he'd finally found somebody who was a kindred spirit.
yeah,
um, and he wouldn't have actually done that if he hadn't found somebody who he felt shared the same values. And of course, again, it sounds quite soft, the softer side of business, but actually, as we well know, we've spoken to other accountants who went down that road and realized that they didn't share any values with the person they went into business with, and it all fell apart as a
yeah.
result. So it's really important to think about that side as well, and not
Um,
just the numbers.
I think that's absolutely right. And it's interesting that both of our first two guests that we've reflected back on there, Harriet and Chris, both have additional coaching or mentoring style qualifications or experience as NLP practitioner over and above their accounting qualifications and experience.
Yeah.
And that may well have contributed to why they stand out in the way that they do.
Yeah.
We should move on. Next up on
Yes.
episode 60 was Ellie Flower, who started her Fox Clever bookkeeping practice back in 2018. Do you want to lead on Ellie, Philippa?
Yeah. I mean, Ellie actually approached us to come on the podcast and said that, she I don't think she'd done one before.
No.
Um, but she was very kind of composed and confident, wasn't she?
Mm.
And I think just from the story that she told, that came from, she got involved in a startup, which was high octane, high stress, um, grew really, really quickly. And she had to learn a lot about business and ended up in the financial side of things. Do you remember that? And she
Oh,
was like,
yes.
goodness knows why it was me. But she learned a lot along the way. And I think she then sort of stepped off and decided
Well,
that
that was partly what prompted her to start her own bookkeeping practice
exactly.
because she'd had poor experience with inexperienced accountants in that business that she was involved with.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's had to really sort of work very hard um, to get over that. And so, as you say, she jumped ship because I think she always wanted to own her own business, and
Mhm.
she came from a family of business owners, so that makes sense. She's gone into bookkeeping with e-commerce as her specialism. I think the previous business was e-commerce as well, so she brings a whole raft of authentic and real day experience because she's actually lived it and breathed it. And she not only has she got her own clients because she likes to keep her hand in there and stay up to date, but she also does a bit of train the trainer type
Mhm.
thing. So she trains bookkeepers in e-commerce. Um, and as she said, it's exploding at the moment with all of the different kind of platforms out there, from the Etsy's through to goodness knows what. So it's a blooming area or niche within bookkeeping. And again, this is another example of somebody who brings something a little bit different to the party, the e-commerce side, but also that business nous. She's been there, she's lived it, she's kind of sweated and cried tears over it. So a really, really strong guest, I think, with a strong story.
Oh,
What did you think, Mark?
Well, I remember she said that she started by going around offering her services locally in what I'm sure was a friendly and very helpful way. And she shared some advice that we've often heard on a podcast. One was the importance of choosing your clients carefully, especially at the beginning. Hindsight being so valuable, and we've just heard that so often. But also how developing a niche or speciality made it easier for her, not just to generate those clients, but also to overcome pricing and perception challenges. And as you say, she moved into that niche of e-commerce businesses. She realized it was taking off. She realized how much of a challenge it was for bookkeepers and accountants who didn't understand the practical day-to-day issues for businesses that are selling through Amazon, Shopify, Etsy, or whatever. And that's opened the door to her providing value-added services to her clients, but also training other bookkeepers and having more clients that feel like a good fit. And how often do we hear, or how rarely do we hear about accountants who've developed a practice without having some special interest or knowledge or background that they can draw upon? And I imagine that's, well, I don't imagine, I know it's one of the things that you do when you're having conversations with accountants, is helping them to identify that specialism, what makes them personal.
And I think this episode is really, it encapsulates everything that I talk about, and you as well, Mark, because there is past experience and expertise, there is niching down, there is choosing clients wisely and having a really clear target. And there's also the kind of areas of expertise like NLP, trauma. All of these things add a slightly different flavor or theme to the type of practice that you offer. And it doesn't have to be kind of really, complex stuff. It's not rocket science. It's just what can you deliver? What can you bring that adds value and that you can talk about and really focus your marketing energy around it? That's what it's all about.
I think that's so insightful. And I never use the word niching with accountants because they tend to find that as scary as they did the word marketing 20 or 30 years ago. So I talk about focus or specialising, as I know you do as well.
Yeah. It brings them out in a rash, doesn't it, I think?
Yeah, and without sidetracking, we both know that there are lots of different ways of specialising and focusing and evidencing expertise, rather than the sort of the historical perception that some have and block out of, I've got a niche. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, exactly. But it's really good to try and understand about what value you bring. And we're all different. And I know you've said that a lot, Mark, that, every single person on this podcast, the guests, have all been different. They're just different people. And that's what makes it really special. So talking about different, we had our 50th interviewee, who we interviewed last week, Paula Tomlinson, who started On the Spot Accountants in 2008. And I think you introduced her to the podcast. So do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I felt Paula gave a great summary of what small business owners really want from their accountant, and that it goes way beyond just getting their compliance work done. And indeed, it was quite refreshing to hear Paula say that as a qualified chartered accountant, she prefers to leave bookkeeping to bookkeepers. Let's recognise different strands. In terms of how she built up her practice, she talked about networking in local groups and listening more than she talked. And that's such a good approach. And it's one of the reasons why introverts often make better natural networkers than extroverts. And I got the impression that when networking, even at the start, Paula will have come across as an experienced business owner herself, because of what she'd done previously, and that will have resonated with those that she was meeting. And back when she started the practice, she also shared with us that she did so with a hefty financial buffer. So unlike most accountants who start their own practice, she won't have been desperate for new clients and taking on the wrong ones, as so many do. And I'm sure that really helped too in building up what she does. What about you, Philippa?
Yeah. I'd actually forgotten until you said that she's a really, she was a massive advocate of bookkeepers. And in fact, thinking back, I did introduce her to a previous client of mine who's a fabulous bookkeeper. And I think just having an accountant who really kind of celebrates them is wonderful. And I know we've interviewed people like Emma Fox, I think it was, who is very much in the same place and kind of really values bookkeepers and bringing them on. But it was lovely to hear that.
Yeah, Emma, of course, runs a bookkeeping practice that works with accountants.
Exactly.
Paula runs accountants that work with bookkeepers.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the other way around, but obviously the power of bookkeeping is something that they talk about. So in terms of Paula, obviously she is a franchisor, which is unusual for us, and it was a kind of a one-off, but I think it did bring some insights about how you need to have systems and processes in place in order to be repeatable. And that's what she said from a very early stage. She wrote everything down and made sure that, it could be done again and again and again without too much effort. So it then became natural that she'd turn it into kind of a franchise business for those people. And it sounds quite grand, doesn't it, for sort of franchise, but a lot of the time she's working with really quite small business owners. I think she said couples, actually. It was kind of not big, but just business owners who wanted to have some support via Paula. And I think Paula seems to spend most of her time now, sort of doing a bit of work herself to keep her hand in, but working on the relationship side with her franchisees and making sure that they're okay and, coaching them, etc. So I think it was a really interesting story and example, just of how you can be different.
Absolutely. And I think that highlighting the value that an accountant, as distinct from a bookkeeper, can bring and develop for growing clients, people who want more than just the bookkeeping and the compliance work done, and recognizing the distinct roles of bookkeeper compared with chartered accountant. And all of her franchisees are qualified chartered accountants. And it's not a big, I'm not in this to promote her, but it's not a big expensive franchise, and she's not looking to take on people with no experience who want to start up a practice. So it's unique and distinct in that sort of field and approach as well. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So we've come yet again to the end of the 30 minutes. Time has flown and we need to wrap things up.
Yeah, we'll be back to our normal interview format next week, and there'll be another Reflections episode like this in a few weeks' time too.
Yeah, but until then, please contact myself or Mark if you'd like to be interviewed on a future podcast in June. Yeah, we're actually looking at August, aren't we? Yes, bad notes. And if there's somebody you'd like to recommend for an interview, as a guest, again, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, you'll find all of the interviews and episodes we've mentioned on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. If you feel we deserve it, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help us reach an even wider audience. Please also let us have your feedback, share the love online too. And if you're a listener who just searches online each week for the next edition, or you only watch this on the LinkedIn feed, do please also subscribe to one of the podcast channels so we have a better idea of how many listeners we really have. It doesn't matter which podcast channel, but do please subscribe. And you can also subscribe to the company page for the Accountant Success Secrets podcast on LinkedIn, as that will help us with numbers too. So thank you ever so much if that is you, and if you're able to do that for us now.
Yes, indeed. So just before we finish up, our thanks again to the sponsor of this episode, Pinnacle Global Group, your trusted outsourcing partner. Do check out their website and their CEO, Mayank, and let him know that you heard about Pinnacle Global on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
And thanks too to the Tax Advice Network, the easiest way for accountants to reach specialist tax advisors. Remember, there's no charge for using the website, findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to try their weekly tax tips written especially for general practitioner accountants. And Philippa, do you want to quickly share your contact details in the traditional way? How can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, or it would be good to go on my website, insight101.co.uk, and you can book a discovery call there. So I support accountants and bookkeepers to stand out, and I think we've talked a lot about 4 very different accountants and bookkeepers today who stand out for different reasons. It's not always easy to know what it is about you that's special and distinct, but working with me will help you to do just that, and it will transform your marketing and in particular your website, which we talked about with Chris earlier in this episode. Mark,
Indeed.
Tell us all about how people can get in touch with you.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned Chris, and you'd also mentioned earlier his neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, and online everywhere I'm Bookmark Lee, and NLP experts will recognize the embedded command to bookmark Lee. So I can simply encourage you to do that, whether to speak at a conference or an event or a regional or a branch. Always happy to do that. Beyond that, I tend to work with sole practitioner accountants, those who don't have co-directors or business partners. And they've reached the stage where they want a decent sounding board to help them feel more confident as regards plans, challenges, key decisions. And I love it when my clients tell me they feel better motivated or excited after one of our conversations. Not everybody wants one-to-one support. Some people are happy working in a group, and that support and collaboration comes through my online Soul Practice Club. Either way, I'm always happy to have an initial conversation with no obligation, no strings, and no pushy sales techniques. It's really not my style. In any event, I'd also encourage you to reach out and connect with both Philippa and me on LinkedIn. And as I said, please follow the podcast pages on LinkedIn and on Facebook.
That's it. We're done. We'll be back next week with episode 63 and our next interviewee, Sharon Baker, who runs, is it Kinder Accountants?
Well, she will tell us next week.
Yeah, I've always wondered.
Yeah, I realised as I typed it, I should have checked it, but in my head it's always been Kinder, but it possibly should be Kinder Accountants.
Yeah, so, I don't know, but I do know that she's had a bit of a design refresh and it's looking great. Anyway, if you'd like to share your story in a similar way, do get in touch. We're currently looking for guests for episodes airing in August, although we're getting close to the end of August now.
Yeah, many thanks, Philippa, and congratulations again on our 2-year Podiversary. Here's to many, many more, and to some exciting new developments related to the pod as well. We'll share more on that in due course. Until next time on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, or anywhere else we might meet online or in real life. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.